This is an introduction to Greek syllables and how to identify them and how to split up words into syllables. So we'll begin by looking at syllable rules. And I'm using the rules that Mounce has in his book, Basics of Biblical Greek, the 4th edition. And these appear in section 4.5, so chapter 4, section 4.5. The good news about Greek syllables is that they work basically the same way that English syllables do. So that's helpful. Let's look first at syllables and vowels. So rule 1 is that syllables have one vowel sound. That may be a single vowel, and the vowels in Greek are alpha, epsilon, eta, iota, omicron, upsilon, and omega. Or a vowel sound can be a diphthong, and that is two vowels that are pronounced as one. And so we have four that end with iota. So we have alpha iota, epsilon iota, omicron iota, upsilon iota. And then we have four that end with upsilon. So alpha upsilon, epsilon upsilon, say that 4 times quickly, omicron upsilon, eta upsilon. So these are our diphthongs, and anything else, any other combination of vowels, is not a diphthong. So now rule 1 means that the number of syllables in a word equals the number of separate vowel sounds. So number of vowel sounds equals number of syllables. So here's a simple example. Lagus. So we have two vowel sounds. We have a single vowel here, omicron, and we have the diphthong, omicron upsilon. And so these two vowel sounds mean that we have two syllables. So la-goose. Let's begin looking at syllables and consonants. So syllables may have one or more consonants. Occasionally syllables have no consonants. They're just vowel only. But most syllables have a consonant, and syllables may have one or more consonants. Open syllables end with a vowel or diphthong. So for instance, ta, the definite article, or kai, this one ends with a diphthong. Closed syllables end with a consonant. So men, it closes with a nu, so it's a closed syllable. Ek, it closes with a consonant, so it's a closed syllable. Let's now look at consonant clusters. Two consonants that can be pronounced together work like a single consonant, and we treat them like a single consonant. Normally, if a word can begin with a consonant cluster, this is a pronounceable cluster, meaning that those consonants can be pronounced together. Note that you do not need to memorize all of these pronounceable consonant clusters. As you come across them, it will become fairly obvious which consonants can be pronounced together. I'm going to go through some examples. There are a number of pronounceable consonant clusters that have rho as the second letter. And so we have beta rho, like brecco, to rain, gamma rho. So this would be like graphe, writing. Delta rho, dracon, dragon, only appears once in the New Testament. Theta rho, thronos, throne. Kappa rho, kra. Pi rho, pra. Tau rho. We have several words that begin with tau rho. Phi rho, phroneo, to think or to regard. And finally, chi rho, like in chronos, time. So rho shows up in these pronounceable combinations fairly frequently. Sigma often appears as the first letter of a consonant cluster that's pronounceable. And so we have sp, sigma beta, sigma kappa, sigma mu, not too many of those, sigma p, more of those. Sigma tau, quite a few of those. Sigma phi and sigma chi, schema. So sigma combinations occur fairly frequently. There are also pronounceable consonant clusters where lambda is the second letter. So we have beta lambda, as in blepo, to see, or glossa, gamma lambda, in tongue. Theta lambda, thlipsis, tribulation. Kappa lambda. So a number of these. P lambda, plerao, to fulfill. Phi lambda. And finally, chi lambda. There are also other consonant clusters that are considered to be pronounceable and work together. So we have some oddballs. So we have, for instance, gamma nu in gnosis, knowledge, or mu nu, mnea, memory. We have pneuma, so p nu. This is a pronounceable combination. And it's spirit, wind, breath. We don't pronounce the P. Here's katesis, creation. So the kappa tau is a pronounceable consonant cluster. And then we have an interesting one here. It's a triple, splunknon. So we have sigma p lambda, 3 letters, splunk, sort of like our English splash. Then we have another pronounceable combination here, chi nu. Splunknon is innards or compassion. So this provides some background that will help us as we move forward. So now we'll move on to Rule 2, and this deals with single consonants and syllables. So Rule 2 is that a single consonant, not a cluster, begins a syllable. And so here's an example. Pater, father. We have pa begins with the P, and then ter begins with the tau. This is an open syllable, ends with a vowel. This is a closed syllable, ends with a consonant. Rule 3 deals with how we handle vowel sounds that we can separate. So Rule 3 says that 2 consecutive vowel sounds are divided. And so here's an example, the word e'an, which means if. So we have e-an. Epsilon alpha is not a diphthong, and so we treat them as separate vowel sounds, e-a, so we have e-an. Another example is uadao, uadao, to prosper or to succeed. We have a couple of examples here. We have the diphthong, epsilon upsilon, followed by an omicron. Then we have this syllable beginning with this delta, delta omicron, and then the end of the word is an omega. Omicron and omega do not create a diphthong, and we already have a diphthong here with the u, the epsilon upsilon, so this omicron cannot be part of that. So we have a vowel sound, u, and then a, and then da, and then o. So we have uadao. So the separate vowel sounds are handled in separate syllables. The next rule deals with consonant combinations that are not pronounced together. So Rule 4 is that a consonant combination that cannot be pronounced together divides in the middle. So the first consonant in that cluster ends the previous syllable. The next consonant begins the next syllable. So here's an example. Embino. Notice that mu and beta, they are not a pair that can be pronounced together. And so we have the first syllable m ending with the first consonant, the next syllable bi beginning with the second consonant. So m, bi, no. Our next rule deals with consonant clusters that can be pronounced together. So Rule 5 says that a consonant cluster that can be pronounced together begins a syllable. This is very similar to Rule 2, which says that a single consonant begins a syllable. So a consonant cluster that can be pronounced together is acting like a consonant, a single consonant. So here's an example, phronema. So we have phi rho, and that is a cluster that can be pronounced together. And so that begins the syllable. Then we have a single consonant that begins the next syllable, and then another single consonant that begins the final syllable. Our next rule deals with double consonants. Simply, Rule 6 says that double consonants divide. And so here we have Angalia. And so we have this doubled gamma here. The first gamma ends the previous syllable. The next gamma begins the next syllable. So Angalia. Finally, our last rule deals with compound words. So Rule 7 says that compound words divide where joined. A compound word is where two simple Greek words have been combined together. Often prepositions combine with other words like diatasso, to arrange or order, ekparuomai, to go out, prosphero, to carry to. There's many of these. So the rule is that the syllable will split at the joint of the compound, so to speak. So here we have ekbalo. This is ek, and then that's attached to balo, to throw. So ekbalo, to throw out. Here we have the kappa and the beta together, and the kappa goes back with the ek, which is the preposition that is part of the compound word, and then balo is the rest of the word. Here we have a double lambda, so we're going back to our previous rule about doubled consonants. And so the first lambda is the end of the previous syllable. The second lambda is the beginning of the next syllable, ek, bal, lo. Another example is ektas, the outside. Here we have ek is splitting from tas, even though kappa and tau can be pronounced together in some words. For instance, ktisis, which means creation. But this is ektas, so it's ek splits where the compound word joins, and then tas. Let us look at some syllable division steps now. So begin at the left, reading left to right. Check the vowel sounds, so vowel or diphthongs, and that will tell you how many syllables you have. Check the consonants and the consonant clusters, and determine which consonant clusters are pronounceable. And then finally, divide the word. So first we check the vowel sounds. Now the number of vowel sounds equals the number of syllables, as we said before. Vowels can begin syllables. So when a word begins with a vowel sound, or when two vowel sounds occur in sequence. So here's an example. Anamia. So this begins with an alpha, and so that's going to be a syllable, the a, and nothing here tells us that there's going to be any other letters with that, so that stands alone. A, na, and now we have iota alpha, but that is not a diphthong, and so that's going to be two separate vowel sounds, and so two separate syllables. So we have a, na, mi, a. So in this word we have two syllables, the first and the last, that begin with vowels. We check consonant clusters to see if they're pronounceable. So when we see a double or even a triple consonant, pretty rare to get a triple, determine if the clusters can be pronounced together. And if they cannot, we divide between the letters. This is easier to pick up when we see examples. Abstractly, it can be a little bit much to try to keep track of. So here's some examples. Mathetes, as disciple. So the vowel sounds, we've got an alpha, an eta, and another eta. So we're going to have three syllables. We have no double consonants or consonant clusters. And so this is pretty straightforward. We have ma, the, tes. Here's another example, apostalois. Apostalois. So we check the vowels. We have an alpha, an omicron, another omicron, and then we have this diphthong, omicron iota. So 4 vowel sounds, 4 syllables. We have a consonant cluster. We have sigma tau, and they're pronounced together. So we're going to split this up as a, pa, sta, that sigma tau go together, and then lois. Another example is angelus. All right, so we note the vowels, the alpha at the beginning, the epsilon, and then the omicron upsilon. That's a diphthong. So 3 vowel sounds, 3 syllables. We have a double consonant. We have this gamma gamma. So it's going to split between them. So we can say ang. Gamma gamma pronounces like an ng, like ang. Ang ge loose. Here's another example. Euangelion. Good news. So we note the vowel sounds. We have u, a, e, the epsilon, and then we have 2 vowels here. This is not a diphthong, so it's an iota and an omicron. So we have some vowel sounds that bump up against each other. We have this diphthong u plus the a, and then we have an iota plus an omicron. So we have u, a, e, a. We have 5 different vowel sounds. We're going to have 5 syllables. Note the double consonant, double gamma. We saw that in Angelia a few moments ago. So we have u, ang. The first gamma goes with the previous syllable. The second gamma goes with the next syllable. Ge, li, an. 5 syllables. U, ang, ge, li, an. Here's another example. Ekbalo. So the vowels are the epsilon, the alpha, and the omega at the end. So 3 syllables. There is a double consonant, that lambda lambda. So we'll split between those. Notice also the compound. It's a compound word. We have ek plus balo. And so we're going to go ek, bal, and then lo. So our last word, splanknon, actually has 2 sets of 3 consonants together. Let's first note the vowels. We have an alpha and an omicron, so that's going to be 2 syllables, even though we have a lot of consonants. We have 2 3-consonant clusters. We have sigma p lambda, beginning, and then here in the middle, we have gamma chi nu. Now, sigma p lambda is pronounceable, and chi nu is also pronounceable. So that means that the gamma is an outlier here. We can figure this out. We've got the sigma p lambda begins this, and the gamma then is split from this consonant cluster that's pronounceable, because that's also treated like a consonant. So we split between the consonant or consonant equivalents. So the gamma at the beginning of the cluster goes with the previous syllable, and then the chi nu goes with the following syllable. So we have splung. The gamma bumping up against the chi gives us that N sound, that nasal sound. So it's splung and then knan. That's how we divide that syllable up. So this has been an introduction to syllable rules and some examples of how syllable rules are applied.